Dr. Rebecca Stone took a deep breath as the transport shuttle docked with Aurora 9. The metallic clang echoed through the small craft, and she felt her stomach twist with nerves. This wasn't just another research mission. Today, she would be the first human to sit across a table from an alien species that had wiped out entire civilizations. The airlock hissed open, and Rebecca stepped into the neutral space station. Her boots clicked against the polished metal floor, each step echoing down the long, sterile corridor. The lighting was harsh and cold, designed to accommodate dozens of different species with varying visual needs. Everything felt alien, from the slightly higher gravity to the recycled air that tasted faintly of ozone and cleaning chemicals. Rebecca had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. She knew everything Earth's intelligence services had gathered about the Krell Syndicate. They were methodical, ruthless, and patient. In the past 100 years, they had conquered 17 different species across 12 star systems. Their method was always the same. First came the friendly diplomatic contact, then the biological warfare, and finally the annexation of whatever worlds were left behind. But Earth needed allies. Humanity had just developed faster than light travel, and they were like children stumbling into a galaxy full of wolves. The Krell had requested this meeting, claiming they wanted to establish peaceful relations. Rebecca's job was to find out what they really wanted. 2 station security guards, members of a species called the Vorthan, flanked her as she walked. They looked like upright lizards wearing environmental suits, and they hadn't spoken a word since she arrived. The silence made her more nervous. The corridor opened into a vast meeting chamber. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat as she saw them for the first time. The Krell were nothing like the computer simulations had suggested. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with dark, segmented exoskeletons that gleamed under the chamber's lights. Their heads were triangular, dominated by massive compound eyes that seemed to track her every movement. When they moved, their limbs clicked and scraped against each other like insects, but there was an intelligence in those alien faces that was unmistakably sentient. The largest Krell stepped forward. Rebecca had studied the files. This was their prime negotiator, the equivalent of their head diplomat. When it spoke, its mandibles moved in complex patterns, while a translation device converted the sounds into words she could understand. "Welcome, human representative," the alien said, its voice coming out flat and mechanical through the translator. "I am honored to meet with your species for the first time. We have heard many interesting things about Earth and its inhabitants." Rebecca forced herself to smile. "The honor is mine. I'm Dr. Rebecca Stone, representing the Earth Science Council and the United Nations." The Krell's head tilted slightly, and Rebecca noticed the way the other aliens in the chamber seemed to position themselves around her. Not threatening exactly, but strategic, like they were preparing for something. "We have prepared a traditional welcome feast," the prime negotiator continued. "It is our custom to share food and drink with potential allies. This shows trust and good faith between our peoples." A smaller Krell approached, carrying a tray. On it sat a crystal bowl filled with glowing liquid that pulsed with soft blue light. The substance looked like liquid starlight, beautiful and mesmerizing. Rebecca's xenobiology training immediately kicked in. Never consume unknown alien substances. It was the first rule they taught at the academy. But this was diplomacy, not a laboratory. Refusing their hospitality could end negotiations before they began. Earth needed this alliance, needed any alliance. Humanity was alone in a galaxy where they had already identified dozens of spacefaring civilizations, most of which were either hostile or indifferent to newcomers. Rebecca reached for the bowl. The liquid felt warm through the crystal, and she could smell a faint chemical odor, almost like bitter almonds mixed with something metallic. Every instinct screamed at her to put it down and walk away. Instead, she lifted it in a toast. "To friendship between our peoples," she said. The Krell watched her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Their compound eyes didn't blink, and she could hear them making soft, clicking sounds to each other. Some kind of communication. She realized they were talking, but not in any language the translators could pick up. Rebecca brought the bowl to her lips and drank. The liquid burned slightly as it went down, leaving a tingling sensation in her throat. It tasted awful, like medicine mixed with cleaning fluid, but she managed to drain the entire bowl without making a face. Delicious, she lied, setting the crystal down with steady hands. Around her, the Krell began clicking more rapidly to each other. Their body language changed, becoming more excited, more expectant. Rebecca noticed them looking at timepieces on their wrists, as if they were waiting for something specific to happen. That's when she realized the terrible truth. This wasn't a feast. It was an execution. Rebecca felt the first effects about 20 seconds after finishing the drink. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and for a moment, the chamber seemed to spin slightly. Her heart rate picked up, and she could feel a strange, tingling sensation spreading from her stomach outward through her body. The Krell were watching her intently now, their clicking sounds growing more rapid and excited. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself, expecting the worst. This was it. She had been poisoned, just like the intelligence reports had suggested might happen. But then something unexpected occurred. Instead of getting worse, the dizziness began to fade. The tingling sensation transformed into something else entirely, a feeling of heightened awareness that was almost electric. Rebecca blinked and suddenly realized she could see better than she had in years. The harsh lighting of the chamber no longer bothered her eyes. Colors seemed more vivid, and she could make out tiny details in the Krell's exoskeletons that she had missed before. Small scratches, variations in color, even what looked like natural patterns that might indicate age or rank. Her mind felt sharp, incredibly sharp. It was like someone had just cleared away a fog she didn't even know was there. Thoughts came faster and clearer than they ever had before. She could process multiple ideas simultaneously, and her memory seemed to have improved dramatically. She could recall conversations from years ago with perfect clarity. But the most surprising change was in her hearing. The background hum of the station's life support systems became crystal clear. She could distinguish between the sounds of different machinery, hear conversations from other parts of the chamber, and then she noticed something else entirely. The Krell were still making their clicking sounds, but now she could hear additional layers to their communication. There were high-pitched sounds, almost like whistles, that seemed to be coming from the aliens but were so faint she shouldn't have been able to detect them. Yet somehow, she could not only hear them, but begin to understand patterns and sounds. They were having a completely separate conversation from what the translators were picking up. Rebecca looked around the chamber, noticing how agitated the Krell had become. Their body language had changed completely. Where before they had seemed confident and in control, now they appeared nervous, even frightened. Several of them were checking small devices on their arms, almost like watches, and their clicking had become rapid and urgent. Is something wrong? Rebecca asked, surprised by how strong and clear her own voice sounded. You all seem nervous. The Prime Negotiator's compound eyes fixed on her with what she was beginning to recognize as surprise. How are you feeling, human representative? Actually, I feel fantastic, Rebecca replied honestly. Better than I have in years. That drink was quite something. What exactly was in it? She watched as the Krell exchanged rapid glances with each other. Their high-frequency whistling became more frantic, and Rebecca realized with growing amazement that she was beginning to understand bits and pieces of what they were saying. Impossible! One of them whistled to another. The toxin should have shut down her nervous system by now. Check the dosage. Came another reply in their hidden frequency. Perhaps the mixture was too weak for their physiology. No, the concentration was perfect. She should be dead. Rebecca felt a cold smile spread across her face. So that's what this was about. They had poisoned her, expecting her to die within minutes. Probably planning to claim it was some kind of allergic reaction to alien food. It was exactly the kind of tactic the intelligence reports had warned about. But here's the thing the Krell didn't understand about humans. Rebecca's grandmother had always kept a garden behind her house in rural England, filled with all sorts of plants that most people would consider dangerous. Foxglove, nightshade, even some mushrooms that could make you seriously ill if you didn't know what you were doing. As a child, Rebecca had accidentally eaten berries from those plants more than once, spending miserable days sick in bed while her body learned to process natural toxins. Her liver had been dealing with plant-based poisons since she was 5 years old. Her digestive system had built up tolerances to compounds that would kill most other mammals. And now, Instead of shutting down her nervous system, whatever they had given her was acting like the most powerful stimulant she had ever experienced. "You know," Rebecca said conversationally, still listening to their panicked ultrasonic communications, "that drink reminds me of something my grandmother used to make by accident. She would mix up the plants in her garden sometimes and brew tea from the wrong leaves. Nasty stuff, but it never did more than make me sick for a day or two." The prime negotiator took a step backward, and Rebecca could smell something new in the air. Fear pheromones, her enhanced senses told her. These aliens were genuinely frightened now. "Oh," Rebecca added with a growing grin, "I can hear you just fine now, by the way. All of you." The prime negotiator's mandibles began clicking rapidly, making harsh scraping sounds that Rebecca's newly enhanced hearing picked up with uncomfortable clarity. The alien took several steps backward, its massive compound eyes fixed on her, with what could only be described as terror. "This cannot be happening," the creature said, its translated voice betraying panic for the first time. "No species has ever survived necrotoxin. 7. It is impossible. The compound shuts down neural pathways in every known form of life." Rebecca stood up slowly, and as she did, she became aware of just how much her perception had changed. It wasn't just her hearing and vision that had improved. Her brain seemed to be processing information at an incredible rate, making connections between tiny details that she never would have noticed before. She could smell the chemical signatures coming from each Krell, and somehow her mind was translating those scents into emotions. Fear, confusion, and something else, desperation. Their exoskeletons were vibrating at specific frequencies that told her they were preparing for something. The slight shifts in their posture, the way their limbs were positioning, the micro-movements of their heads, everything was screaming that violence was coming. But there was something else her enhanced senses were picking up. Traces of chemicals in the air that shouldn't be there. Industrial compounds, synthetic materials, and something that smelled like biological weapons. Her mind raced through her xenobiology training, cross-referencing the chemical signatures with known toxins and warfare agents. "You know what's interesting?" Rebecca said, walking slowly around the table. The Krell tracked her movement, but seemed afraid to get too close. "I'm picking up some unusual chemical traces in the air. Atmospheric dispersal equipment, if I had to guess. The kind used for spreading airborne toxins over large areas." The prime negotiator's entire body went rigid. "I do not understand your meaning." Rebecca smiled, and she could feel it wasn't a pleasant expression. Her enhanced pattern recognition was connecting dots at lightning speed, pulling together fragments of intelligence reports, diplomatic communications, and physical evidence her senses were gathering from the environment. "Oh, I think you understand perfectly," she said. "Your ship is docked at Base 7, isn't it? And unless my newly improved nose is lying to me, you've got a cargo hold full of biological weapons just waiting to be deployed. Planning a little atmospheric bombardment of Earth after this meeting went badly, were you?" The silence in the chamber was deafening. Several of the smaller Krell began backing toward the exits, their clicking communications becoming frantic. Rebecca could understand more of their ultrasonic language now, and what she was hearing made her blood run cold. "Initiate backup protocol," one was saying. "The human knows about the dispersal systems." "How is this possible?" another replied. The briefing said their species was primitive. Rebecca's enhanced mind was racing through possibilities, connecting information she shouldn't have access to. Somehow, the toxin had unlocked parts of her brain that normally remained dormant. Pattern recognition systems that evolution had built into human DNA were now running at full capacity, allowing her to process and synthesize information at an unprecedented rate. "Let me guess," she continued, pacing around the chamber while the Krell watched nervously. "Your standard operating procedure is to poison the diplomatic representatives, declare the species too dangerous for contact, and then deploy biological weapons to soften up the planet before invasion. Your hidden fleet is probably positioned at, let me think, coordinates 47 Alpha 9 just outside our solar system's detection range." The prime negotiator stumbled backward, its exoskeleton making scraping sounds against the floor. "That information is classified at the highest levels. It is impossible for you to know those coordinates. Your bioweapon storage is on Deck 7 of your command ship, Rebecca continued, her mind pulling together fragments of overheard communications, chemical traces, and logical deductions. And your communication kill switch frequency, the one you use to shut down your weapons if something goes wrong, is broadcasting at 847.2 terahertz. I can actually hear it humming in the background. She paused and looked directly at the Prime Negotiator. Shall I continue? Because I'm just getting started. Your invasion timeline has you beginning bombardment in approximately 6 hours. Your target zones are the major population centers, starting with North America and Europe. And your backup plan, if the biological weapons fail, involves kinetic bombardment of our major cities. The chamber erupted in panic clicking as the Krell realized their carefully planned operation had been completely compromised. Rebecca could smell their fear pheromones intensifying, and their ultrasonic communications became a chaotic mess of emergency protocols and abort commands. The question is, Rebecca said, her enhanced senses picking up movement in the corridors outside the chamber, what are you going to do about it? Because right now, every detail of your operation is being recorded and transmitted back to Earth. Your little surprise attack just became very, very public. The Prime Negotiator's compound eyes fixed on her with what Rebecca was beginning to recognize as genuine terror. For the first time in her species' history, the Krell had encountered something they couldn't poison, couldn't kill, and couldn't intimidate. They were facing a human who had not only survived their deadliest toxin, but had been enhanced by it. The Prime Negotiator made a series of rapid clicking sounds that Rebecca's enhanced hearing immediately recognized as emergency commands. Within seconds, she heard the softest of gas being released into the station's ventilation system. The air around her began to shimmer slightly, and she could detect at least 3 different chemical compounds being dispersed through the atmosphere. Emergency protocol activated. One of the Krell whispered in their ultrasonic frequency, "Release all biotoxins. Maximum concentration." Rebecca took a deep breath and immediately felt the chemicals entering her lungs. Her enhanced senses could identify each one. There was something that smelled like bitter almonds, another compound that reminded her of rotting flowers, and a third that had the sharp, metallic scent of ozone. These weren't just toxins. These were weapons of mass destruction, the kind of biological agents that could wipe out entire planets. But instead of collapsing or showing any signs of distress, Rebecca felt a wave of energy surge through her body. Her vision became even sharper, her reflexes quicker, and her mind started processing information at speeds that felt almost supernatural. "Oh, wow," she said, breathing deeply again. "That's much better. Is that hemlock 9 I'm detecting? We have a similar compound in some earth mushrooms. My grandfather used to accidentally harvest them sometimes when he went hunting for regular mushrooms. Terrible for most people, but great for focus if you can handle it." The Krell were backing away from her now, their clicking becoming frantic and desperate. She could smell their panic pheromones getting stronger, and their ultrasonic communications were becoming chaotic with overlapping emergency signals. Rebecca could feel changes happening throughout her body. Her heart was pumping more efficiently, sending oxygen-rich blood to her brain at an accelerated rate. Her liver was working overtime, not to neutralize the toxins, but to process them into something useful. Her nervous system was adapting to use the chemical chaos as fuel, enhancing every aspect of her cognitive function. Then she heard familiar voices from the corridor outside. "Rebecca, you okay in there?" It was Captain David Harris from the transport ship that had brought her to the station. His voice sounded different, though, sharper, more alert. "Better than okay," she called back. "How are you feeling, David?" "Like I could run a marathon and solve quantum physics at the same time," came his reply. "Whatever they pumped into the air, it's having some interesting effects." Through the chamber's windows, Rebecca could see other humans moving through the station corridors. Engineer Lisa Thompson was at a control panel, her fingers flying over the interface as she worked through technical problems that should have taken hours to solve. Security Chief Brian Walker was moving with reflexes that looked almost superhuman, his enhanced awareness allowing him to spot potential threats that would have been invisible before. The biotoxins that were supposed to kill every human on the station were instead turning them into enhanced versions of themselves. Rebecca realized what the Krell had fundamentally misunderstood about humanity. "You see," she said, turning back to the terrified aliens, "humans are what we call persistence predators. Do you know what that means?" The Prime Negotiator's compound eyes were fixed on her, but it didn't respond. "It means we evolved by outlasting everything that tried to kill us," Rebecca continued, walking closer to the aliens who kept backing away. "Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators, diseases, and yes, poisons. For millions of years, our ancestors survived by eating things that would kill other animals. Mushrooms, berries, roots, even rotting meat when they had to." She could access the station's computer systems now, her enhanced cognitive abilities allowing her to process information streams that would have been overwhelming before. The Krell security protocols were like children's puzzles to her upgraded mind. Our digestive systems learned to handle toxins. Our livers became incredibly efficient at processing dangerous compounds. Our brains developed the ability to adapt to chemical changes and use them as advantages rather than letting them become weaknesses. Rebecca's fingers moved across a control panel, accessing the Krell's own ship systems. She could see their troop positions, their weapon stores, their communication networks. Everything was laid bare to her enhanced pattern recognition abilities. "The 3 biotoxins you just released," she continued. "One is enhancing our cardiovascular function. Another is boosting our neural processing speed. The third is accelerating our healing and recovery systems. You didn't try to kill us. You gave us upgrades." The Krell were clicking frantically now, trying to communicate with their fleet, but Rebecca was already jamming their frequencies and redirecting their communications through her own filters. "So here's what's going to happen," she said, simultaneously accessing their weapon systems, their navigation computers, and their military databases. "We're going to have a new conversation about the terms of contact between our species. And this time, we're going to discuss what humanity brings to the galactic community." The Prime Negotiator stared at her in horror as Rebecca systematically dismantled their entire operation with nothing more than enhanced human cognitive abilities and their own biotoxins flowing through her system. The hunters had just become the hunted. Rebecca stood in the center of the chamber, her enhanced mind processing information streams from dozens of sources simultaneously. The Krell fleet positions, their communication networks, their weapon systems, their entire military infrastructure. It was all laid bare before her upgraded cognitive abilities. What should have taken teams of analysts weeks to uncover, she was accomplishing in minutes. The biotoxins continued flowing through her system, but instead of weakening her, they were making her sharper with each passing moment. Her liver processed the alien compounds like a sophisticated chemical factory, breaking them down into components her body could use. Her brain had adapted to the neurochemical chaos, turning what should have been deadly poison into the most powerful enhancement drug imaginable. "Here's what's going to happen," Rebecca said, her voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there hours earlier. The enhanced pattern recognition in her brain was calculating dozens of variables at once: political implications, military consequences, economic factors, and social dynamics across multiple species and star systems. The Prime Negotiator's compound eyes darted around the chamber, looking for escape routes that Rebecca had already identified and blocked through the station's security systems. The creature's exoskeleton was literally trembling now, creating a soft rattling sound that her enhanced hearing picked up with crystal clarity. "The Krell Syndicate will immediately cease all biological warfare operations," Rebecca continued, simultaneously monitoring their fleet communications and disabling their weapon systems. "Every bioweapon in your arsenal will be destroyed under human supervision. Your ships will return to your home territory and remain there." She paused, accessing more of their databases. The scope of their crimes was staggering. 17 species wiped out, billions of lives lost, entire civilizations reduced to ash and memory. Her enhanced empathy made her feel the weight of each tragedy, but her upgraded logical processing kept her focused on solutions. "Furthermore," she said, "you will serve as humanity's formal introduction to the galactic community. You'll provide us with star charts, diplomatic protocols, and contact information for every spacefaring species in this region of the galaxy. Consider it payment for trying to murder me." The Prime Negotiator found its voice, though the translated words came out shaky and uncertain. This cannot be happening. Our biotoxins have never failed. They have eliminated entire species across dozens of worlds. It is not possible for any life form to survive them, let alone be enhanced by them. Rebecca smiled, and she could feel that the expression carried more confidence than any smile she had ever worn before. Her enhanced senses were still detecting the 3 different biotoxins in the air, and her body was still processing them like vintage wine, extracting benefits from compounds that should have been lethal. You made one crucial mistake, she explained, pulling up historical data about human evolution and dietary habits. You tried to poison a species that literally evolved by eating everything that tried to kill us first. Do you know how humans discovered alcohol? By eating fermented fruit that would have made other animals sick. Do you know how we learned about medicine? By experimenting with every plant, mushroom, and chemical compound we could find. The alien's mandibles clicked nervously. Your species is insane. No, Rebecca replied. We're persistent. For millions of years, our ancestors survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, and famines by being willing to try anything. We ate poisonous plants until we built up immunity. We consumed rotting meat when fresh food wasn't available. We developed the most versatile digestive systems and the most adaptable metabolisms of any known species. She could see the exact moment when the full implications hit the prime negotiator. The creature's entire body sagged, and the clicking sound from the other Krell became mournful rather than panicked. Through the station's communication systems, Rebecca was already sending detailed reports back to Earth. But more importantly, she was broadcasting evidence of the Krell's crimes to every species in the Galactic Communication Network. The Syndicate's reign of terror was ending not with military defeat, but with complete exposure of their methods. Within hours, requests began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Zenthri Republic wanted human consultants to analyze Krell biotoxins that had been used against their colonies. The Vorthan Alliance requested human advisors to help develop defenses against biological warfare. Even species that had never heard of Earth were suddenly very interested in establishing diplomatic relations with the only beings who could neutralize the galaxy's most feared weapons. You know what the really funny part is? Rebecca said to the defeated Krell leader, her enhanced mind already drafting treaties and trade agreements with a dozen different civilizations. If you had just asked nicely for an alliance, we probably would have said yes. Humans like making friends. We're social creatures. We want to explore, learn, and cooperate with other species. The prime negotiator's voice was barely audible through the translator. What happens to us now? Rebecca considered the question, her enhanced empathy weighing justice against pragmatism. You're going to help us fix the damage you've caused. Every species you've harmed, every world you've poisoned, every civilization you've destroyed. You're going to spend the rest of your existence making amends. She looked around the chamber one final time, still feeling the alien biotoxins coursing through her system like liquid lightning. And next time you meet a new species, she added, maybe try asking nicely first. The age of Krell dominance was over. The age of human diplomacy had begun.